Step into a market in the Middle East. The air is thick with spice, the clatter of copperware, the rhythm of bargaining in half a dozen languages. At first, it feels entirely modern, but much of what you're hearing is ancient. Words spoken here trace back thousands of years. Rituals at weddings or funerals echo traditions that outlasted empires. Even gestures of hospitality, like sharing bread or coffee, carry meanings rooted in the world's first cities. This is the land where humanity built its earliest monuments, wrote its first laws, and shaped the alphabets that still form the words you're reading now. Yet the most astonishing story isn't about invention, but survival. Entire communities continue to carry the voices of Mesopotamia, of Egypt, of forgotten empires thought long vanished. And one of them has preserved a language that once linked kings, traders, and prophets across the ancient world. By the end of this video, you'll know who they are and why their survival changes how we see history itself. Welcome to Armchair Archaeology, where history is still happening. If you love slow-burn mysteries and big-picture history, take a second to subscribe and ring the bell. It helps this curious little corner of YouTube keep exploring the past with you. To understand the peoples of the Middle East, we first have to look at the land itself. Geography here is not just background, it is destiny. This region sits at the hinge of 3 continents, connecting Africa, Europe, and Asia. For thousands of years, mountains, deserts, rivers, and coastlines shaped where people settled, what they grew, and how they interacted with one another. The Fertile Crescent, stretching from the Persian Gulf through Mesopotamia and into the Levant, was a cradle of abundance. Rivers like the Tigris, Euphrates, and Nile turned dry plains into fields of grain, supporting villages that became towns and towns that became the world's first cities. Yet just beyond those fertile valleys, deserts nurtured nomadic herders who traded wool and livestock for grain. In the rugged mountains, smaller communities thrived in isolation, while coastal ports opened to the sea and welcomed distant merchants. Even in the earliest times, these worlds overlapped. A Sumerian merchant might carry clay tablets inscribed with contracts, only for them to travel by caravan across deserts and appear in Egyptian or Levantine markets. Obsidian from Anatolia has been found in Mesopotamian sites, proof that people were exchanging goods and ideas across vast distances thousands of years ago. This interaction gave birth to innovations that shaped humanity: writing, law, monumental architecture, even the alphabet that would later evolve into the scripts we use today. None of these arose in isolation. They spread because the geography of the Middle East made connection inevitable. And in that sense, the Middle East of antiquity feels strikingly familiar. Just as today's world is tied together by trade routes, shipping lanes, and digital networks, the ancient Middle East was bound together by rivers, caravan paths, and coastal trade. The land itself ensured no single culture could stand alone. Even now, trade, migration, and digital networks echo that same geography-driven interconnection. When people speak of the first civilization, they are often thinking of the Sumerians in Mesopotamia. Here, along the Tigris and Euphrates, cities rose from mud brick, with streets, marketplaces, and temples that towered like man-made mountains. In these temples, priests oversaw offerings, while in quiet offices, scribes pressed wedges into clay tablets to record grain rations, contracts, and hymns. These tablets carried more than numbers. They were the beginning of writing, a technology that changed the world by allowing memory to outlast the human voice. The Sumerians also produced some of humanity's earliest literature. Stories like the Epic of Gilgamesh told of heroes, gods, and even a great flood,
echoes of which would reappear in later traditions. They also codified law, writing down rules that governed property, family, and justice. These weren't grand philosophies. They were everyday decisions, preserved in clay, laying the foundations of legal systems still central to modern life. Then came the Akkadians, a Semitic-speaking people who built on Sumerian achievements. Under Sargon of Akkad, they forged the world's first empire, ruling multiple cities under one authority. Yet instead of erasing Sumerian culture, they absorbed it. Akkadian kings commissioned scribes to copy Sumerian texts, ensuring those myths and laws survived long after Sumerian itself faded from daily speech. This blending, conquerors preserving and adapting the culture of the conquered, would become a recurring theme in Middle Eastern history. Archaeology makes these beginnings tangible. Cylinder seals, no bigger than a thumb, carried a person's identity when rolled onto wet clay. Towering ziggurats still rise above Mesopotamian plains, their weathered bricks a reminder of humanity's first great cities. The tablets they left behind still shape the way we think about laws and literature today. To stand before them is to feel the weight of origins, the first cities, the first laws, the first empire. And if you enjoy having a little piece of history at your desk while we explore these stories, we've just launched our first piece of channel merch, the Ancient Secrets mug. It's a subtle nod to the mysteries we uncover here, and you'll find it linked at the top of our store.
While Mesopotamia flourished in the east, other powers arose across the Nile, Anatolia, and the Mediterranean coast. Egypt, the Hittites, and the Phoenicians each built distinctive civilizations, yet they constantly interacted as rivals, trading partners, and sometimes unlikely allies. Egypt's kingdom, anchored by the Nile's steady floods, became one of the longest-lasting civilizations in history. Pharaohs claimed divine authority, and their colossal monuments still dominate the landscape. Yet Egypt was never isolated. From Lebanon came cedar wood for ships and tombs, from Anatolia, tin for bronze, and from Afghanistan, lapis lazuli for jewelry. Even the bust of Nefertiti contains pigments imported from abroad, proof that luxury goods moved across vast networks, much like today's global supply chains. In Anatolia, the Hittites, master charioteers and diplomats, built an empire that rivaled Egypt. Their clash at the Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BCE ended not with total conquest, but with negotiation. The result was the world's first known written peace treaty, preserved in both Egyptian hieroglyphs and Hittite cuneiform. The very idea that two superpowers could coexist under agreed terms was revolutionary and echoes in every treaty signed since. Meanwhile, along the coast of Lebanon, the Phoenicians turned the sea itself into their empire. Renowned sailors and traders, they carried purple dye, glass, and timber across the Mediterranean. But their most influential export was far less visible: the alphabet. By simplifying complex writing systems into a small set of symbols, they gave merchants and sailors a practical way to record transactions. That simple innovation became the ancestor of Greek, Latin, Arabic, and Hebrew scripts, including the alphabet you are reading on screen right now. Neighbors, rivals, and traders, these three cultures remind us that the Middle East was never a set of isolated kingdoms. It was already a connected world. If the birth of writing and the first international treaty lit up your curiosity, we pulled together a deeper dive in our ebook, Secrets of the Ancient World: Mysteries, Technologies, and Lost Civilizations. From how alphabets evolved to the quietly brilliant tech behind desert travel, it's all there. The link is in the pinned comment. As power shifted across the Middle East, two traditions emerged that would shape history in very different ways: the imperial vision of the Persians and the religious identity of the Israelites. The Persian Empire, built by rulers like Cyrus the Great and Darius, stretched from the Indus Valley to the Aegean Sea. What made it remarkable was not only its vastness, but also how it governed.
Instead of demanding uniformity, Persian kings allowed subject peoples to keep their languages, religions, and customs. To hold this mosaic together, they built royal roads and postal stations that allowed a message to cross thousands of miles in a matter of days. At Persepolis, their ceremonial capital, stone carvings still show delegations bringing tribute: Greeks with olive oil, Egyptians with papyrus, Indians with textiles. The empire thrived on diversity, not suppression. Meanwhile, the Israelites, a much smaller people, developed a tradition that would outlast empires. In a region filled with gods tied to cities and rivers, they centered their faith on one God, universal and transcendent. Their scriptures and laws preserved a sense of identity even when they lost political power. During the Babylonian exile in the 6th century BCE, many Israelites were uprooted from their homeland, yet their rituals, stories, and written texts kept their community alive. The legacies of these two peoples continue today. The Persian model of tolerance is echoed in modern ideas of pluralism, while the Israelite tradition of preserving identity through faith helped shape Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. One empire demonstrated how diversity could be governed. One community showed how memory and belief could sustain a people even in exile. Together, they reveal that power in the Middle East has always been about more than armies. It has also been about ideas. If you're enjoying how these big ideas still ripple into our lives, consider tapping Super Thanks. It helps us keep the research tools humming, and it tells the algorithm this kind of thoughtful history is worth surfacing.
The arrival of the Greeks and later the Romans reshaped the Middle East, but not by erasing what was already there. Instead, they layered new languages and institutions onto cultures that were already thousands of years old. When Alexander the Great swept through the region in the 4th century BCE, he left behind more than battlefields. He founded cities like Alexandria in Egypt, designed as centers of Greek learning. Greek became the language of government and scholarship, while theaters and gymnasiums appeared in once foreign landscapes. Yet, local traditions remained powerful. In Egypt, priests still performed rituals to Isis and Osiris, and even Greek settlers began honoring local gods. Statues carved in Greek style sometimes bore the faces of Eastern kings, blending two worlds into one. The Romans carried this cultural fusion further. By the 1st century CE, their legions guarded Judea, Syria, and Mesopotamia. They built aqueducts, roads, and amphitheaters, yet everyday life remained multilingual and multicultural. In the trading city of Palmyra, inscriptions survive in Latin, Greek, Aramaic, and early Arabic. It was a society where merchants and pilgrims navigated several identities at once. It was in this setting that new religious ideas took shape. Christianity, born in Roman Judea, carried Jewish traditions into a Greek-speaking empire and spread across the Mediterranean. Mystery cults and Eastern deities also traveled west, reaching Roman cities through the same trade routes that carried spices and silk. In Palmyra, a caravan broker might bargain in Aramaic, sign contracts in Greek, and pray in Latin. Everyday life was lived through several languages at once. The Greeks and Romans left theaters, roads, and ruins behind. Their deepest influence was cultural blending. They showed how the Middle East could absorb conquerors, merging foreign traditions with local ones, until entirely new identities emerged. In many ways, their world of mixed languages, shared cities, and traveling ideas feels familiar to the globalized world we know today.
The story of the Middle East did not end with the fall of Rome. New peoples arrived, each leaving a mark that reshaped the region while also being reshaped by it. Arabs, Turks, and Mongols all came as conquerors, yet their legacies were more complex than conquest alone. The Arabs carried with them a new faith, Islam, which spread with extraordinary speed in the 7th century. Within a century, Arabic had become the shared language of trade and scholarship from Spain to Central Asia. Baghdad, the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, became a beacon of knowledge. At the House of Wisdom, translators worked to preserve and expand the ideas of Greek philosophers, Persian scientists, and Indian mathematicians. The results did not stay in Baghdad. They moved outward, eventually fueling discoveries in medieval Europe. Even today, words like algebra and alchemy remind us of this legacy. Centuries later, Turkic peoples established powerful empires of their own. The Seljuks opened a new era of Islamic rule, and the Ottomans built a state that lasted for centuries. From their capital at Istanbul, they ruled over Arabs, Greeks, Armenians, Kurds, and Jews together. Walking through an Ottoman bazaar, a visitor could hear Armenian merchants bargaining beside Greek sailors, while a call to prayer echoed from a nearby mosque. It was a city that lived many identities at once, much like the cosmopolitan capitals of today. Then came the Mongols, whose sudden invasions shook the 13th century. Baghdad was devastated, libraries destroyed, and population scattered. Yet even the Mongols did not remain strangers for long. Within generations, they converted to Islam and became patrons of the culture they had once threatened. The echoes of that fusion still appear in words we use daily, from algebra to coffee. Each wave of conquest added rather than erased. New rulers transformed the Middle East, but in time, the Middle East transformed them as well. If one thread ties the Middle East together, it is faith. This region gave rise to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, religions that now span the globe. Yet faith here has never been a single story. From the fire temples of Zoroastrian Persia to the mountain shrines of the Druze, the landscape is marked by traditions both vast and intimate. Judaism was the first to take root, centered on one God and one covenant that sustained a people through exile and return. Christianity carried that story forward, spreading from Roman Judea outward in Greek, Latin, and later into dozens of languages. Islam emerged in the 7th century, uniting Arabs under the Quran and rapidly becoming the faith of empires from Spain to India. Within Islam itself, diversity blossomed. Sunni, Shia, and Sufi traditions developed unique rituals and philosophies that still shape daily life today. Other traditions endured as well. Zoroastrianism, once the state religion of Persian kings, still survives in small communities who keep their sacred fires burning in temples. The Yazidis of northern Iraq preserve a belief system blending Mesopotamian myth with echoes of Christianity and Islam. The Druze, beginning in Lebanon's mountains, formed a philosophy so distinct it defies easy classification. Bedouin tribes carried rituals tied to the cycles of the desert, celebrating survival itself as sacred. These faiths did not exist in isolation. Concepts of angels, visions of paradise, sacred laws, and even final judgment appear in more than one tradition, reshaped with every retelling. Archaeologists have found shared sacred spaces where inscriptions in different scripts suggest people of multiple faiths once prayed side by side. A prayer whispered in a synagogue, a chant rising in a church, and a call to prayer from a mosque may sound different, yet together they reveal a dialogue that has lasted for millennia and still continues today. For millions of people, these traditions remain part of family life, festivals, and rituals across the region. Which thread of continuity surprised you most? Shared sacred spaces, familiar rituals, or a language that never quite disappeared? Drop your thoughts and your theories in the comments. We read every one.
The peoples of the Middle East inherit their past not only through memory, but through the ground beneath their feet. Archaeology here is not simply the study of lost civilizations. It is about discovering connections that still shape living communities. Stone inscriptions do more than celebrate the reigns of kings. They preserve voices. Aramaic, once the common language of merchants and officials, appears on tombs, temple walls, and pottery fragments from Egypt to Mesopotamia. In a few villages in Syria and Iraq, families still speak dialects descended from that very tongue. A greeting exchanged in the street today can sound almost identical to one spoken in a marketplace 2,000 years ago. Burial sites reveal another kind of continuity. Tombs in Anatolia contain jewelry, figurines, and weapons placed with the dead, reflecting beliefs in an afterlife. Royal graves in southern Iraq held lyres, feasting vessels, and offerings of food. These discoveries remind us that ancient communities sang, mourned, and celebrated in ways that still resonate with traditions across the Middle East. Modern funerals, weddings, and seasonal festivals often echo those same rhythms of song and ritual. The ruins themselves are also living symbols. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the columns of Baalbek, and the carved facades of Petra are not silent relics. Locals weave stories that tie their ancestors to these ancient builders. A weathered stone can be a landmark for a village, a focus of folklore for storytellers, or even a site of prayer for pilgrims. Archaeologists analyze the materials, but for those living nearby, the ruins remain part of their identity. In the Middle East, history is never entirely past. It rises from the soil, carved into stones, carried in names and customs. The land itself speaks, and people still listen. If ancient inscriptions and burial rites fascinate you, we dug into more surprising continuities in our ebook, Secrets of the Ancient World: Mysteries, Technologies, and Lost Civilizations. From forgotten pigments to echoes of Aramaic and living speech, it's all waiting, and the link is in the pinned comment.
The modern Middle East is often described in broad strokes, as if it were a single culture or a single faith. In truth, it is a mosaic of peoples, each carrying stories that stretch back thousands of years. Arabs form the largest population. Their language links communities from Morocco to Iraq, yet each region carries its own poetry, music, and dialect. In the deserts of Arabia, Bedouin poetry and traditions of hospitality echo values that guided nomads long before the rise of Islam. Persians, heirs to ancient Iran, maintain a literary tradition that spans from the epic of Ferdowsi to the lyrical verses of Hafez, while still walking in landscapes marked by Persepolis and the memory of Zoroastrian fire temples. Jewish communities remain tied not only to Israel, but also to ancient diasporas that once thrived in Babylon, Yemen, and North Africa. Kurds trace their heritage to the rugged mountains where tribes once resisted empires, carrying forward a culture of music, dance, and oral storytelling. Armenians, who endured centuries of upheaval, preserve a strong identity in their churches, crafts, and songs around Mount Ararat. Assyrians continue to honor their connection to one of history's earliest civilizations through liturgy, festivals, and tradition. Other groups also add to this tapestry. The Druze, rooted in Lebanon's mountains, practice a faith with secretive traditions that set them apart. Bedouins, still present across deserts from Jordan to the Sinai, keep nomadic customs alive even as many settle in towns. Each of these communities carries a heritage that is both ancient and modern, fragile yet resilient. To walk through the Middle East today is to hear this mosaic in the air. Arabic in one street, Kurdish in another, Armenian chants in a church, Hebrew prayers at a synagogue. These voices, layered like the ruins beneath the soil, form a living archive of humanity's oldest crossroads.
Looking at the Middle East today, it is easy to see the turbulence of recent centuries, shifting borders, colonial rule, and the pressures of modernization. Yet beneath those layers lies something extraordinary. The peoples of this region have carried their identities across thousands of years, preserving languages, rituals, and stories through every wave of change. Geography played a crucial role. Armenians and Kurds kept their songs and dialects alive in mountain strongholds where armies seldom lingered. Bedouins maintained poetry and traditions of hospitality in deserts that resisted conquest. Farmers along the Nile, Tigris, and Euphrates passed down agricultural cycles first practiced in antiquity. Empires conquered repeatedly, but they rarely erased what they found. More often, they borrowed and added. Persians adapted Babylonian traditions. Arabs inherited Greek science and Persian philosophy. The Ottomans governed a patchwork of communities, each allowed to keep its own laws, churches, and rituals. Every wave of conquest created new layers without destroying the old. This survival is visible in today's cities. In Jerusalem, synagogues, churches, and mosques cluster within a single neighborhood. In Istanbul, Byzantine domes rise beside Ottoman minarets, while bazaars overflow with carpets, spices, and coffee that trace back to ancient trade. In Cairo, the Arabic call to prayer weaves together with Coptic hymns sung in a language descended from the speech of the pharaohs. Walking these streets is not like entering one history, but stepping into many at once. The Middle East is often called the cradle of civilization, yet its greatest wonder is not only what was invented here, but what survived. Civilizations thought long vanished still live in their descendants, who walk the same landscapes and carry fragments of ancient memory into the present. This is not one story, but thousands, stitched together into a single human tapestry. And yet, one thread in this tapestry has survived more directly than almost any other.
At the beginning of this journey, we promised to reveal one community that still carries a language most people believe vanished long ago. That community is the Assyrians. Today, they live in scattered communities across Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and in diaspora populations around the world. Many still speak dialects of Aramaic, the language that once stretched across the ancient Near East, linking kings, traders, and prophets. It was the common speech of empires and the language spoken by Jesus himself. To hear it today in a family prayer or festival song is to hear a living echo of voices that first filled temples and marketplaces thousands of years ago. This survival is not unique to the Assyrians. It is the essence of the Middle East. From Sumerian laws to Egyptian rituals, from Persian philosophy to Bedouin poetry, the peoples of this region have carried their past forward instead of letting it disappear. The Middle East is not simply the cradle of civilization. It is a living archive. Its ruins rise above cities. Its inscriptions survive in daily speech. Its faiths remain central to global identity. So when we look at the Middle East, we should not imagine a single culture or a single story. We should see thousands of stories, each one layered onto the next, woven together into a vast human tapestry that still unfolds today. If this journey left you with questions or surprises, share your thoughts in the comments below. And do not forget to like this video, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss another story from Armchair Archaeology. Until next time, keep questioning, stay curious, and remember, in the Middle East, the past is never buried. It still walks, speaks, and sings in the lives of its people.